Are you also presenting?
Yes, my name is Eric
Bisola.
Bisola.
Yeah.
Right.
How do I pronounce your name?
It's Abisola, but everybody calls me Bisola. Just remove the A.
Bisola.
Yeah.
Sola.
Yeah.
Sola
Mhm.
Osinuga.
Yes.
Sola Osinuga.
Thank you.
The Center for Health Equity.
Yes.
Where is
Yes.
that?
It's here. It's UNC.
Okay, okay.
But I did my PhD in Iowa, but this one we got it.
Yeah,
That's
no,
why
that's,
I did it.
like, one of the-
Oh, sorry, yes, they're not coming.
How long have you been here? A year.
Announcement or something, but I guess there isn't.
Well,
Okay, so there are
it's
one, two
technically,
presenters.
they're only
There were five.
wash, you know, it's not
Right.
that disparate.
I'll leave that to your discretion.
For wash, I did most of my wash work.
Oh, I should talk to you sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm more at environmental science.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I definitely want to connect more.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out.
Yeah, please do. I live like 18 minutes from here, so. Yeah.
I live like 10 minutes from here.
So we want to have you two present the person who didn't show up. So just.
So you currently have.
Well.
So I'm ready. Okay, them in 15:45, so maybe 20?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can prepare.
Okay.
So was there anything preloaded on your computer?
Your presentation was preloaded?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
but
okay.
hers, Absola wasn't.
Okay, yeah, that's, we forgot to. There should also have been a third one. that shows the-
Ah, yeah, yeah. Here,
But you have the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Okay.
that's our look for.
Just moving to other countries as well, right?
That's the plan.
Do you know Dennis Gijum at Synergy?
That's kind of understand.
That's very cute.
That's so you have plans to do.
Yeah.
So you're looking at. I think.
Did you keep up on Ethiopia and yes, remember that was around like 2 years ago.
I think Ethiopia is a lot of cases there.
Okay.
Yes, see the work that the Rubik's team is doing, and so supporting the leadership.
But I promise, like,
So
you
you
from
Wow.
all that going on. I think I'm.
Yes, I mean, it's going with the road.
Yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. Is it dense related though? Because the model makes sense. It's a dense area.
I think it's this is like.
Side right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last time I.
Wow, that's so much. I mean, I know this becomes, I mean, I know this happens, get concerned.
And yeah, how's that?
Last night.
I was maybe August, May, no, May, June, July.
Okay.
I met at the NC.
Ah,
I was literally in Nairobi. I know I can look. You're still at GM, right? The GM.
Yeah, we are still at it.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
How could you start?
Yeah. Who's going there?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I know, I had. Nice. Very nice. Oh, just about visas in Nairobi. Now is it easier with the embassy? I know there was a battle of getting, like, I mean, I the first time, but like, first time I was getting appointments at the embassy.
Okay.
Yeah.
For example, we have a group that wants to
Yeah.
full
The food constraint, things
Right.
from-
Hi, nice to meet you.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Okay. With the, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's- Yeah.
I think it's.
Yeah, I feel like it's worse when I feel like it's an excuse.
How does it work? Like, you have to
I've been renewing in person. You know, the issue of renewing online was just came the other day, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been renewing in person. Yeah, yeah. I'm like, yeah, but not they give you like as long as your program lasts. So right now I'm like 5 years. Like 5 years.
So like, how long does it take to get into
Never, almost never. There's crowds. There's like crowds, but like mainstream, they're not mainstream. You know, unlike Canada, when you're students, it starts to count as like that. So the years will build up. In the US, you actually not expected to apply, whereas in this, so the plan is for me to finish my student visa, switch and either like a postdoctoral, some kind of research scientist job, and then the university can sponsor me to get the work visa. Yes. Yeah, but you almost never expect it to happen. In fact, you can think, if I apply for a different visa, one day if I want another student visa, they will not give it to me, like, you have intentions. You're going to okay, I will let you catch your breath.
What is the development that like we are both like it means just like somehow they're not getting integrated. So I think it's more like a great. We'll definitely keep it. Yeah, that's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, and the everyone was like.
Like I've never. I work, I keep global and innovation. More in the yes. Because right now, without it, we end up losing.
Shall we start? Everybody's ready after this coffee. It's good, but nobody's going to sleep and eat a lot. That's fine. My name is Carlos. I work here for the Warren Institute and be a moderator today. So for those who are here now, check the presentations to see that you're in the room that you're supposed to be and the presentations that you're going to see. I got in the wrong room today, this morning, so so it's good to check it before. So the first presentation will be by Eric Mushira from Synergy. He's going to speak about the reducing ergonomic risk in container-based sanitation, collecting services to improve safety for sanitation workers. Eric, please. Yes, so you have 15 minutes, okay? Yeah. Sarah will be your.
So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to this presentation
As you have heard, my name is Eric. I work for an organization called Sanergy, and we operate a large network of container-based sanitation. And one of the most critical aspects of that piece is waste collection. And so this presentation is about the work that we are doing to try and understand the risks around waste collection and also be able to make it safer for our sanitation workers. So welcome. Sorry. Good. So allow me to start by giving you a context of what we do at Sanergy. I know some of you may not be familiar with that. And so the picture here, this is actually a satellite image of Kibera, which is one of the largest informal settlements in Kenya. Now, in Kenya today, we have 11 million people that live in such informal settlements. The problem is, these informal settlements do not have basic infrastructure. Some of the things that we take for granted, such as a sewer system, right? I know most of us probably live in cities, there are sewer systems, and you don't worry about the sanitation waste, right? Now, for the guys that live in the informal settlement, that's a big problem. And the consequence of that is we have a lot of diseases because the waste is not managed properly. We have death, especially among us, the children, and a lot of economic losses in terms of loss of productivity. Now, at Sanergy, this is the problem that we are trying to solve. And how are we trying to solve it? So we take what we call a full value chain approach. Now, I know some of you are asking, what does a full value chain approach mean? So it's very simple. The first thing we do is we construct low-cost container-based toilets. And then after constructing them, we franchise them to the local communities for them to operate, right? And then after doing that, we offer professional waste collection services, right? Because these places do not have sewers. So we have to find a way of getting the waste from the community. So we offer professional waste collection services. And then after that, what you can see here is the treatment of that waste. So we aggregate all that waste, and then we treat it and convert it into valuable byproducts, some of which is the fertilizer. We call it Evergrow. And I have some of my colleagues here, Ruthie and Dennis, and they can be able to pass the samples of the fertilizer that we produce and something we call insect-based animal protein. Now, how big are we? So we have over 140,000 people using our products every day. So that's quite huge. And every day we also, annually, we remove about 20,000 tons of waste from the communities. So this is waste that would actually have gone to the environment and caused a lot of pollution, leading to diseases and all these other negative consequences in the community. Now, I believe you now have a good background of what you do at Sanergy. So I'll get to the subject matter of this presentation. So as I said, waste collection is super critical in this value chain. And one of the characteristics of our waste collection process is that it involves a lot of manual handling. So it's very labor intensive and there's a lot of manual handling. Now, the problem with that is that it poses what we call economic risks to the people that are working in that space. And so what we set out to do in this study was to try and understand these risk factors in our waste collection. And not just only to identify them, but to quantify them, right? Put a number to the risk involved in the waste collection, and therefore be able to design interventions that will ensure that we are able to reduce the risk that are faced not just by the workers at Sanergy, but all the workers that are in the container-based sanitation space. So this is really what we'll be talking about in this presentation. Right. So for greater context, this is how the waste collection process looks like. So you can see a lot of manual handling. So we have someone lifting the containers from the toilets. You can be able to see that they have to carry these containers for some distance because we do not have any road infrastructure within the communities. And there's a lot of pulling and pushing of manually operated carts, basically because we do not have infrastructure to run conventional trucks in these areas. Now, these are the things that actually pose a risk to the staff that are doing the waste collection. And also there's the whole aspect of this task is very repetitive. So if you do it today, you do it tomorrow, you do it for 1 year, then if the whole process is not safely designed, you start to have issues with your back problems, your muscle problems, and that's something that you want to ensure that it doesn't happen. Now, the question is, how do you actually assess those risks in each and every individual activities that I've been able to show you there? Now, so what we did is, we actually did a lot of research, especially from the academia and from industries that are involved in manual handling. And we looked at a lot of tools. These are some of them. Sorry, these are some of the tools we looked at. But finally, we narrowed down to two tools. So there's what we call the NIOSH equation, which is mostly used for lifting, loading, and offloading activities. And there's what we call Snoop tables. In some areas, we hear it being called the Liberty Mutual tables that are actually recommended in terms of carrying and pushing activities. The reason we narrowed down to these tools is because they are very robust. So we looked at what is the methodology, where have these tools been used, who has used them, are they accredited by International Safety Organization, and these are the best tools that we could find in this space to be able to assess economic risks. So after identification of the tools, we now went to try and apply these tools in our waste collection process. But before I go to that, I think it's important I give you a little context of what those tools look like. There's a whole lot of literature about the NIOSH equation and how it was developed and how it works, but we'll not go into that. But I think it suffices to say that the whole aspect of the NIOSH, or the whole idea behind the NIOSH equation, is actually, it takes into consideration several factors, such as your posture when you are lifting an object, such as what we call the lifting distance, the vertical distance, and all these aspects, and the frequency of the piece of work you are doing. So it takes in account all these and enables you to calculate what we call the recommended weight limit, which is basically trying to ask for a specific activity, right, that is within these factors, what is the recommended weight that someone can be able to lift safely without exposing himself or herself to any economic risk. So the idea is, once you get the recommended weight limit, you calculate something we call the risk index or the lifting index, and ideally it should be 1 or below. So if you have an activity whose risk index is above 1, then it means that it poses a risk to the people that are doing that activity. So our whole goal here is to identify all the activities that are above 1, where the risk index is above 1, and be able to design interventions for that. Now, for the Snoop table, so it's the same concept, but what we are looking at are things like factors like the carrying distance, the carrying frequency, the weight of the object. And what this tool gives you is what is the acceptable population, right? What is the acceptable population that can be able to perform these tasks in a safe way, right? So you look at these factors, you do the calculation, and then it gives you what is the acceptable population. Generally, we want to design your workflow such that 75% of women can be able to do that work very safely. All right. So let's go to the interesting part, which are the results of what we found out. So when you applied the NIOSH equation to our lifting activities, so the first activity is when someone is actually lifting or removing the containers from the toilet. And when you applied the NIOSH equation, we found that the risk index was about 2.03. Now, remember we said that you want the risk to be below 1, right? So this means we have a problem. And so using the two, we were actually able to identify why is this risk index so high, right? And it had to do with the long, what we call the long distance of lift. So someone has to lift something that is below the ground for more than 80 centimeters. So that's essentially what was causing the risk. And then there's issues to do with posture, how the employee or how the sanitation worker is actually positioning himself or herself as he does the lifting. And so what we have done here, the first intervention that we have come up with is actually to work with the sanitation workers to adopt what we call good lifting techniques, right? And this might sound so simple, like you just have to lift like this, you have to squat and then you lift, right, without bending. But it involves a lot of behavior change activities because this is the way they are used to doing things. And for you to be able to change behavior, it's not easy. So we had behavior experts work with our staff to actually try to understand, do they understand these things? What is their knowledge retention capacity? Why are they not able to always adhere to these guidelines? And then designing incentives around that so that we ensure that all our staff are actually adhering to good lifting practices. The next bit of what we are currently doing is we are now redesigning the toilet so that we move away from a top retrieval of these containers to a side retrieval of the containers. What that does is actually it reduces what we call the distance of lift from like 8 centimeters to something below 5 centimeters. So once you reduce that, then your lifting index or your risk index, sorry, comes down to around 0.7, which is within what you'd expect for someone to be able to do the work safely. So that's what we have done on the lifting. And then the other piece of workflow that we looked at is when they are loading the carts, and we use the same NIOSH equation to calculate what is our risk index. It was also quite high at around 2.4. And from the work we did, the reason why this was very high was also because of the high distance of it. So this guy has to lift these containers, which is significantly heavy, for over 1 meter, right, distance, and that strains them a lot. And so what we did here is now to adopt, design the carts so that now they have retractable doors, and we were able to reduce the distance of lift now to around 70 centimeters. When you do that, your risk index comes down drastically to around 0.7, which is quite acceptable. So this is a design change that was very simple for us. When we initially designed these carts or bought this cart, we actually had no idea that just by having these sidebars that high, it would pose a risk index to our staff, right? And by using these tools that have been developed, such as the NIOSH, we are able actually to say this is actually the ideal distance that someone must be able to lift for. The next bit was on the carrying. So remember, once someone picks the toilet, the containers from the toilet, because we don't have good road access, they have to carry them to a point where the hand cart can be able to reach, right? And so for this activity, we applied what we call the Snook table, right? And the result we got was that this activity can only be done safely by just, I think it's, I can't see properly. So it's about, sorry, or rather, it was just a very low value in terms of the females, right? That can be able to do. Remember, we said that we want to design our workflow so that 75% of female can be able to do the work safely. And of course, this morning I was in a presentation about the barriers that female have in terms of adopting sanitation, or rather being involved in the sanitation work. So what we have done around the carrying distance is actually the reason is actually to develop an app that actually enables to what you call route planning, right? So we have GPS coordinates for all our toilet location, and we have designed an app that enables you to feed this information into the app, and then it's able to design like how someone should be able to collect the toilets, how to cluster the toilet, basically the route, so that then someone does not have to walk for more than 50 centimeters. And this actually reduces the risk to a point where 90% of the female can be able to do the job very safely. And then lastly, on the pulling of the cats, we found this to be the most risky part. So only 1% of the, or rather less than 1% of the population, male population in this case, can be able to do the job. And so for this, what we have done is to completely eliminate the use of hand cats in most places. And now remember, I said we do not have good road infrastructure. And so what we have done is to try to adopt tractors that are actually used in the agricultural space and modify them so that they can be able to operate in those informal settlements where we do not have roads and where the access is very narrow for a conventional track. So we have been rolling these tractors out this year, and what that means is that none of our staff now is actually pulling the carts when they are loaded with waste. And of course, that completely eliminates any form of waste. So that's how we have been able to apply the work that is being done by the academia and the tools that are developed by the academia to actually come up with real life situations that actually improve the welfare of sanitation workers. So what do we intend to do next? So after implementing all these things, we want to go a bit deeper and do things, something we call the EMG test, so that we're able to measure basically the mass of sickness of these employees as they work, and therefore be able to determine what is the level of strain and whether there are things that we need to do further to be able to prevent any MST risk or any economic risk to the staff working in this space. So thank you so much, and looking forward to your questions.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I must confess, this is really interesting and I really like how we use the Naive implementation and the structurals. I wanted to ask if you collected any sort of data directly from the participants to also sort of quantify the risk on their end through self-reports or something.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So in fact, before we started this work, what we did was initially to actually do a survey amongst the sanitation workers to ask them what is the most strenuous work that they do, right? And they were able to give us feedback in terms of that. So the waste collection process, the whole of it involves a lot of activities. And based on their feedback, that's why we narrowed down to these 4 activities and decided to focus on them, because that's where they thought or they experienced a lot of strain as they do the work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, my name is Patrick Wood. I work with Soil, who does container-based sanitation as well. And we've been considering looking at ergonomics for the waste treatment side. Have you applied these equations to the waste treatment side of the process?
So we have not yet done that, and that's something that we'll probably be looking to do, and we can actually share knowledge in terms of
Talk after.
Thanks. Yes, please.
So I'm saying it's liquid waste that you are collecting from those places. Have you also considered building biodigesters?
Have we considered building biodigesters? So for us, the way our value chain works is we are very interested in the fecal waste, right? The dry fecal waste. So our toilets are what we call urine diverting toilets. And the reason is that it's actually quite easy to process the solid waste when it's not mixed with the liquid waste, right? So currently we do not use the liquid waste. We dispose it in government treatment facilities, but then we use the fecal sludge to make fertilizer and other products. I think we are always exploring what are the other options we can do the waste, but we have not yet been able to do large scale biodigesters yet.
Yeah. I think Ghana, we have a success story with that. So
okay.
I think maybe in future, should look at that also so that maybe instead of carrying it into containers.
Yeah.
So that they maybe lay pipes to
Lay pipes.
wherever you want to collect it and use it for your business.
Yeah, I think those are very good ideas, and yeah, we should stick. Right?
Thank you for this session.
Yeah, thank you.
You're most welcome.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
So. So our second speaker couldn't make it today, so we want to have two presentations, and this one will be by Absola Osinuka. She's from here, from the University of North Carolina, and she's going to speak about water insecurity and unpaid labor, quantifying burdens and musculoskeletal health outcomes among a rural Nigerian woman.
Okay, I hope I get it right. All right.
Sorry, let me help. My fault.
I guess I will have more time. 20 minutes. Great.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about some of the research I did pre-pandemic in Nigeria. It's focused on trying to understand how water insecurity affects women's work in their homes, and how does this also affect musculoskeletal health outcomes. And yeah, thank you. So I know that many of us probably know about how gender inequality sort of makes women most responsible for performing domestic labor in their homes. And some of the metrics here is from study done by Oxfam, trying to explain how gender kind of increases poverty, and also women in rural communities kind of spend up to 14 hours a day on unpaid care work, and it has implication on school attendance rates, their ability to get work outside of their homes, and basically it impacts on economic productivity, educational assignments, and other health outcomes. I'll be focusing more on the health outcome aspects of the problem. So the study, I conducted a study in Nigeria, and in Nigeria, we know that in rural areas in Nigeria, just to give you an example, many of the tests done by women depend on water, and almost 3 million women in rural Nigeria spend more than 30 minutes per day collecting water. This metric was a study, a systematic review, like trying to calculate time spent on water across different 24 African countries, and Nigeria ranked second amongst that study. So water collection, labor, and history of water carried have also been associated with increased risk of musculoskeletal pain in different studies. However, the relationship between water insecurity and domestic work, how does presence of water affect a woman being able to perform her domestic tasks activities efficiently in her homes, has not been holistically studied. The graphic here just shows, if you look at it, you can see the difference in the type of activities done by women in developed countries versus those done by women in developing countries. So working for long periods in awkward postures, manual loading, and lifting places women at risk of experiencing musculoskeletal pain in the back, neck, and upper arm. As you can see, this slides here as from my work, and the woman in the first picture
because we sort of observe these women in the field doing the work throughout the duration of them performing domestic work, sometimes as much as 3 hours, 4 hours. They may be in that posture. Some may be washing clothes for 2 hours with the baby on their back. Obviously, this will place them at risk of having musculoskeletal pain. The one thing is that there's been a lot of anecdotal data, a lot of qualitative data on this, but there have not been many studies really focused on quantifying this risk. How do we put an estimate to this risk? We know the burden, but we want to be able to quantify the risk. And so for us to do that, we decided to conduct a systematic review and meta-analysis to quantify the relationship. The link is here, it's been published already. The second thing we did was develop a questionnaire that, because there's no really standardized tool to assess this. This is just very basic and is more tailored to occupational sector. Like people tell you to use the NODIP questionnaire, and it's so different. It's not contextual based. So we had to contextualize. That's why we created that questionnaire. And then we also wanted to quantify these physical demands in terms of ergonomic tools, not only observational ergonomic tools, but trying to estimate the amount of time they spend in these awkward postures. So here is just an excerpt from the published study. As you can see here, is about 60% increase in risk if you women that this meta-analysis table, this forest plot shows that women that perform highly physically demanding domestic work are 63% more likely to experience back pain compared to women that do not spend so much time performing domestic work. And these are the studies that were included in meta-analysis. So the second objective is how did we develop the domestic work experience measures? And then how did we use those measures to look at the relationship with musculoskeletal pain? So here is the model that we developed. This model was developed using behavioral theories that have been used in the literature. One of the theories is called the transactional model of stress and the demand control model. The demand control model has been heavily used in occupational studies to try to understand how appraisal of stress would sort of impact on how people view themselves, to how appraisal of stress affects people's perception of the work itself, and how does that relate to them having health issues. So here are some of the factors that is in our model, like regular demographic factors and life stage of the woman. Then psychosocial domain is how they appraise themselves to be stressful using the demand control model. And then social domain in terms of support system that could sort of, what is the support system? Even if they don't have enough money, do they have people to help assist them in doing the work? Do they have grown children, all that? And then the physical domain is the things I've mentioned before, the frequency and time spent on doing domestic tasks, the posture and movements of tasks, and then presence of water insecurity and scarcity. And then there's a difference between them being in a neighborhood that experiences water insecurity, and then that's also different from them actually being responsible for water carriage and collection. All that impact on health could be physical and psychosocial. So here are some of how the measures are operationalized. For the physical, as I'd explained, we had items from frequency of task, lifting and loading, proximity to water source, experience of water scarcity. The psychosocial, positive and negative appraisal of responsibilities. How do they feel about doing the task? And then time pressure. Do they have time to do other beneficial activities in their or is their time mostly spent doing domestic work? And then social support in terms of emotional support from children or family members or even spouse. And then the measures are musculoskeletal pain at 60 minutes in continuous duration for the past 2 weeks, and then pain severity. We also wanted to know not only yes or no, but how severe is that musculoskeletal pain. So, and it was analyzed, we used logistic regression models, binary and ordinal models to examine this relationship. So I'll just briefly go through this because I don't want to spend too much time on this. As you can see here, an average of 29 hours a week is spent doing domestic work, compared to 41 hours a week on paid work. Women mostly rely on dog wells, and more than half of these women have to transport water using their heads, and many of them are kind of low income, and they are like, the mean age is about 31 years old. So I'll just give, this is highlighting the effect estimates, the odds ratio relating to water security. As you can see here in the blue box, you can see that carrying water was really associated with having more severe back pain and neck pain compared to those that do not carry water. And other factors too are important, like stress appraisal and demand control, in terms of having control on when and when they want to do their domestic tasks was also important. So I'm going to quickly talk about the last part, which is beyond the self-report information, which has been in the literature. We want to now quantify in using specific, to get the metric of to what extent are women being exposed to these risk factors. So we know that there's limitation of self-report data. We want to improve the accuracy and precision of exposure data, and we also want to identify the at-risk population and the most demanding tasks. So our objective was to characterize physical demanding labor by examining postures, movement in terms of speed and level of physical activity using metabolic energy equivalence, METs. So we did a repeated measures design. What basically this means is that we enrolled about 37 women in our study, and for each, we followed each woman, we collected data at least once. Some women collected data as much as 4 times or 3 times. So we wanted to sort of understand what is the daily activities for an average man. What are the kind of tasks does she do? And within this task, what are the risk factors within the task? So we also enrolled some pregnant women in our study too. That is another objective beyond the scope of this presentation, but we wanted to know how much tasks done differs by pregnancy level. So the tools we use is similar to the Fitbit. I know many people probably use Apple Watch and stuff. So it's basically a watch, but we attached it to the arm to be able to measure upper arm elevation if a woman is fetching water, and then one to the back, and then one at the waist. That's how we use the accelerometers. And then, as I had said before, an average observation time of 70 minutes, between an hour to 3 hours, as much as 4 hours. We didn't want to say, we wanted to just observe them doing work in their settings. So we didn't want to put a specific time into when we want to observe them. So we just, whenever a woman is doing domestic work, we observe her doing the work, and then we also put these tools on her body. And so we had 109 full visits and task-based exposure measurement. Another important thing that we did was that to enroll the women, we wanted to be sure that we can have varying level of water stress. So even though these households are predominantly in water insecure regions in rural Nigeria, Ibadan to be precise, we know that some houses have access to water, while some houses do not have access to water. So we enrolled women based on using, like, just having, do you have how much time, using the JMP scale of water insecurities, and use it to categorize their water level into very water stress, medium water stress, and the water stress. So our analysis, we used a linear mixed effects model because we fixed water stress level and pregnancy while because we had repeated measures. So the individual, the random effects part of it is the repeated measures for the person that we collected data from. So this is a very interesting part of the work. We wanted to understand what amount of time does a woman spend walking while doing domestic work. For example, carrying water on the head, 74% of the time, the woman is walking when carrying water on the head. Fetching water from the well, she's bending, and what that means is that she's fetching water, she's bending and standing 76% of the time. Other childcare activities, as you can see here, cooking and food preparation is mostly done sitting, Cleaning task is also very, very stressful. She's stooping, bending, and that's like extreme posture most of the time, and more than half of the time. And then we also looked at other times, the times during the visits, the full visits when she's not doing anything. For example, no or personal hygiene tasks, pause from tasks, she's just walking to well, or other hygiene activities happens 36% of the time. So here is our measure, some of our measures, the exposure metric. We categorize neutral and extreme postures based on the methods that are used in the ergonomic literature. And we also categorize metabolic energy equivalence of task. Many studies focus on physical activity measurements use MET. So we just used what they usually, their categorization into low, moderate, and vigorous. And we also wanted to know how fast she's doing her work. And that's why we categorize into low and high, trunk and speed. So here is one of the results, which is the percent time spent in extreme arm posture. We found that it was really high in those that are moderately water stressed, although it wasn't significant, but percent time spent in extreme trunk posture, that is bending, is really, really high in those that are water stressed compared to those that are in the least water stressed group. Another time, participants engaging in water, if you look at this, the first slide just shows you across, it doesn't separate by the kind of task a woman does, it's across, it's by her status, whether she's water stressed or not. While the second slide is dividing, stratifying by the type of task the woman does in the home. You can see that cleaning, carrying and fetching water is really, really high. And also laundry task also puts a woman in working in extreme postures for longer periods compared to all other tasks that are here. I think for fetching water is as much as 25% of time in extreme postures, and which is really high compared to other tasks, arm postures, I mean. So for the metabolic energy equivalent of tasks, water-related tasks also involved spending more time in vigorous METs. That means the woman is really working in high physical activities when compared to other tasks. And those that are most water stressed spend a little time in light METs. That means those that are water stressed don't get more time of rest compared to those that are least water stressed. So the key takeaways of this study is that we were able to use the methods in the literature or the JMP tool on water access and water insecurity to divide women into based on their water security status. And then we were also able to observe how water affects the performance of domestic activities. And then we're also able to now assess what are the physical demands of these demanding activities and how does that relate to a woman experiencing back or neck pain. So the key takeaway is that domestic labor increases a woman's risk of musculoskeletal pain across low and middle income countries, and especially in rural Nigeria. And the risk factors from unpaid labor are comparable to those from paid service industry. The estimates we got from our study, when we compared it to what we had in paid industry, it was even very comparable. And in some cases, the risk estimates in our study was even higher. Water-related tasks are more physically demanding than other domestic tasks, and water insecurity exacerbates the physical stress from domestic labor. And in all, multiple interrelated factors from the physical, psychosocial, and social living conditions affect time-space activities of women doing domestic work in rural Nigeria. So that's the end of my presentation. I know there are probably multiple questions. So. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation, and great to see how those different activities at the household are contributing to the muscular pain. However, I think we know that these women are also involved in other livelihoods activities, including farming, including the collection of firewood, and all of that, which all aggregate, to the muscular pain. So how are we able to sort of
Yeah.
say that maybe it's for the water aspect and other domestic activities that is there, higher than the one in the farm and the firewood collections and things like that.
Thank you so much. That's such a valid question. And we collected data on farming activities. I just didn't list farming. It's part of the domestic activities because for us to generate that table, we are observing women doing work. We're following them for 3-4 hours. So if a woman is farming or she's going to farm, it's going to be recorded. And we also use audio diaries. I just didn't have enough space to describe that method. We also use audio diaries to sort of describe the kind of task a woman does over the day. We wanted to understand what kind of task do you do over your day. And we collected this information at least twice from each woman. So we're able to have multiple times to compare. And in the model, like the ordinal logistic regression model, we actually controlled for the risk factor from paid work because we collected data on those that are artisans. In this study, they were not really involved in like skilled labor force. They're mostly semi-skilled workers and they're like hairdressers and artisans. So we collected that information and included it in our model to sort of correct for that effect. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think this is it's an eye-opening to me as well. One, I want to find out when you finish this research, did you share it with the communities that you went for this data, especially the men? What was their impression about what you found?
Oh my God.
And then the second, well, sorry.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yeah, I wish I was in that community as well. So that's one. I would have that opinion. Then the second one is trying to model this and doing the survey. Was there a point where maybe you asked a woman that, what do you think about doing this work? And the woman said, look, I'm satisfied or I'm happy doing this. You don't have to tell me anything about what you are doing. Just for the way of understanding whether people have actually taken cultural practices and buried their minds irrespective of how they suffer, whether they still enjoy doing it or not. And then I just want to know the men's perspective about this research.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for these questions, Erin. Because I'll answer the first one before we could even get into the community, because it's kind of a bit invasive for you to ask a woman to devote 5 minutes of your time while you're staying in her home and observing her doing work and putting these tools on her. So we had to sort of go through the faith-based community, the traditional leaders, we used the community entry specialists, and really had sessions. We had sessions with the men's group, they had this men's group, and we had to have buy-in from the men, although they laughed, half of the time they were laughing, they're like, what are you doing? So you went to school, you went all the way to America to study. They're laughing at me, but they actually obliged, and we actually had a presentation at the University of Ibadan and invited some of these leaders because we couldn't really we've not done the community awareness yet, but we want to sort of have like a small toolkit or an infographic to share back the results in a much more simple manner to show them that this is what we found. But we've spoken to the leaders and said, fine, it may look very simple, but these are the things we found. And we hope to design a behavioral change because most of these things, even though we know that there's poverty and there's water insecurity is the reality, but the work will be done in different ways. Just observing, you see a pregnant woman that's like almost 8 to 9 months pregnant, carrying water here, carrying a baby on the back, carrying her down. So some of these things are behavioral interventions that we can sort of fix. And the second part, which you said, is the women. The same thing, half of the time, they're like, so what do you want me to do? If I don't do this work, my husband will marry another wife. I have to cook, I have to do all of that. So we try to do some like a short focus groups with them. I didn't present the result here, but most of the things, as you said, is very traditional norms. And we can change the women, but we realize that going from the health-based perspective to trying to understand what is the relationship, how does this affect your wife's health? How does this affect for young women that are like 18, that are living in a complex community with in-laws, trying to sort of make them understand that how does this affect your woman if she's pregnant. We feel like that would be a better approach than just focusing on the women and trying to tell them to change, because many of it is above them, and we have to take a more system-based approach to solve the problem.
And I feel the city makers would be, yes, and this can be then the route to getting water to the premises rather than just allowing them to walk 2 miles to bring the water. So you need to share these results, not only at the conference here, but share it even though it might be very difficult to share before the men. Share it with them so that they might help relieve the women from that pain. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think maybe when you went into the committee, there was a bit of culture shock when you presented your findings to them. And when we talk about farming and the other artisans, they might think they are doing their daily job. I think that's where they get their money. So maybe you could also relate it to the person doing the 8 to 5 day job, who is always on in a chair. We also have our own effects from sitting for long hours. So maybe you can tell them that with us, we are getting more economical friendly chairs to sit on so that we can get better postures. So maybe going forward, we should also develop techniques that can help them relieve their behavior. And when it comes to the water connectivity, in my country, Ghana, for instance, sometimes the communities are very far apart. And when it comes to laying of connections to the various communities, the cost involved sometimes even supersedes the project cost itself. So it becomes a challenge. So maybe going forward, I don't know if there are government officials here take like, perhaps going forward, we need to take a look at this. Perhaps anytime we are bringing a water project in any community, should consider exactly laying of pipes to connect it to their various homes, or maybe taking it closer so that there will be more comfort bringing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have one more question. Apologies, guys, everybody, please bear with me. Yeah,
I was just signaling this way.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
I was wondering actually something similar. So did you think that when women had the pain, was it a driver to actually kind of go and improve water source, for example, if either pipes or improved well or anything like that?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. So the coping strategies that I would say that women used to deal with the pain is many of the ones that I had grown children, at least children above like 10, they help them. That's number one. And then number two is household water sharing. I feel like the WASH literature needs to really focus on how household water sharing is a social capital tool that has been used in homes that in communities that are kind of water insecure, because we realize that living in a water insecure community does not mean that you experience water scarcity. They are two separate things. And that's why we separated those in our model, because household water sharing is a tool that has been used to reduce or alleviate this stress from having to go distance. But another thing is, even though there's distance, like I can just give an example of a woman, like even though the well is in front of her house, she still has to carry the well, fetch the water from the well, and she's rushing. That's why I said we measured speed to speed of work, especially in the morning. They are rushing to make sure that they prepare the meal, take the children to school. And even though the well is just in front of the house, she's trying to fetch, she's fetching like 10 or 15 pails, rushing, going in and out, and doing that consistently. It may be short-term pain, but there's still a bit of this. It may not be long-term pain, and may not be as much as a woman walking distances, but there's still some risk in it. And apart from the distance, the time taken to fetch water, there's also the terrain part of it. There was even, just to share with you, there was a time when we saw a woman fall, and we had to quickly rush her to the emergency clinic around the place. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was fetching water, and she was carrying water on the well and stuff. And I wasn't there, because if I was there and I saw it, sometimes I would just say, let me help you, because I would feel somehow just watching someone doing all of that. And she fell. So there's also the risk of falling, trips, because of the uneven terrain. Yeah.
I do have a question now. There may be a really simple reason why this isn't done, but I grew up helping out on farms,
Mhm.
and, you know, water is the heaviest thing to carry around, so we would put water in a bucket with a lid so that it doesn't fall out, and then on a wheelbarrow so it can go over uneven ground. And I've always wondered why this isn't done in more contexts. Because, you know, it's really hard to lift water all the way up here, and then you can only carry so much.
I think it's just a cultural thing. I think for women, maybe carrying the wheelbarrow is such a male kind of job.
Okay,
Yeah, so compared to carrying water on the head and stuff.
yeah,
I mean, we could research, but that, I'm just talking based on my concept. I may be wrong.
there's probably a
Yeah.
reason that
Mhm.
women don't do that elsewhere, but I wonder, because it's much easier that way. I don't know.
Supply chain could also be huge, because not everywhere you can access those ones, especially in the rural areas. So if you have to carry a wheelbarrow there on a project and give them, they will quickly change, because that is actually a transformational thing for them.
Mhm.
But for somebody to wake up and go and buy a wheelbarrow for maybe 5 hours, he has to wait for maybe a market day, which is coming every 7 days.
Right.
And then get a car, hop on the car, pay for the fare, bring the wheelbarrow to the village. I think it's a waste of time for that person. If you consider.
I just, to like add to the complexity of it, it makes me think immediately of the example of like distributing bed nets in fishing communities and how quickly they're used for fishing. It's like, also, if wheelbarrows were distributed to women for collecting water, how long would they last in the hands of the women? Like, how quickly would they end up being repurposed for
other things,
something else?
The money will take it far.
I agree.
When people know that this is now in the community, a business person will come and establish a business there and support there and all this. But when it is not there, nobody will establish any business support.
Okay, thank you so much for indulging me and asking these cool questions and giving me like and my team different things to think about. Yeah, so beyond the musculoskeletal health problem, our next phase is to also understand how this affects better outcomes, and we actually putting in some proposals to get funding to do that kind of thing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Absola. Thank you, Eric. We still have 5 minutes. If someone wants to make another question to Eric, he's here. Maybe you thought about the question when you were in another session. So we still have 5 minutes. You can ask more questions. That's your time. If no. Wow.
For you, what's the extreme arm position? Is it
Oh,
this one?
yes, above 90, so yeah. Mhm.
And then medium.
Yeah, medium is, yeah, I should have graphic for that.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you everyone for coming here today. I think it was very interesting, this debate. I really appreciate to have this opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Eric. But I would just. And you're as right, nice.
I love this because they get this efficient
Only my daughter went home, but my wife. Yeah, and they're all.
The police.
And then